break people of the notion that capital constraints are the key limiter to the business. This is a variant on that talk that's more data and instrumentation heavy, and as a result more dialogue driven and a lot more numbering. So there's two, you have to make sure to keep those two things separate. And the meta theme of Gary's talk, what you should be looking for when you're thinking about how you can frame up what he's talking about is look for his initial conjecture for the business. You know, his initial conjecture is not overly simplistic, isn't the right word, but it's just very simple. Right? It's fair. It was simple in the most beautiful way. Right? His initial conjecture was very simple. And what did Gary do is if he didn't plan, he didn't do a lot more other than simply, as you watch him talk about this business, act, experiment, instrument, learn, and act again. Right? Always searching for the thing that was good, the critical, seeking new knowledge or the flaw in the business that he needed to go work out. And those results from his business became the operating metrics that drove the underlying company. And as a result, at the end of the day, Gary can now effectively estimate the economic frontier of the business that he created. I think we're going to talk about the e-commerce version. Yeah. So as a result, it's important to understand Gary's. So when you ask a question about pivoting, like what's pivoting all about? Well, this is the interesting thing. So I'm old school about pivoting. Pivoting is what people call like tuning your business as they're figuring shit out. I call pivoting effing up, right? I'm way old school about it, right? Pivoting is, how can you tell the difference between pivoting or just thrashing around until you run out of money? You can't actually know while it's happening, you can only know ex post. So people who survive the pivot process then look back on it and go, see, businesses pivot, right? Not interesting. Right? This is the interesting part. What is the point of the experimentation process? Generating dialogue and then action. And this is the third piece for this evening and why you should pay particular attention to Gary, because Gary does pivot. Gary pivots. Again, I'm using pivot in an idiosyncratic way. Gary pivots because he built an online business, which is that the economic frontier of that business was discovered. It was a business that he discovered and worked. It was a business model that worked, but was unsatisfactory for Gary. Gary did not want a business generating, $53 of profit, whoever estimated the profit, right? The business that I generated out of the dashboard, that cafe, had a fixed economic frontier, $30,000 a year. That was all that thing could deliver at the volume, no matter, we could bring cheap labor out, we couldn't do any better than what we were doing. We weren't going to make any big difference. And Gary will discover, figures out through online sales, he puts $1 in marketing, he gets this amount of transactions, which results in this amount of conversions, which results in this amount of watches sold at this margin, at this volume, and this is the business. And what Gary decided was that was an unsatisfying business for him. He wanted a much, much bigger business, and that is a pivot. That is the difference between thrashing around and a pivot. A pivot is, I figured out a business that's inherently not the business that I want to be in, for whatever reason. In Gary's case, because he just aesthetically, I think it was just an aesthetic choice. And you can even feel he might want to talk to him about the consequences of that pivot. One of the consequences was he had to buy out his co-founder. He has a co-founder in this story. So to pivot this business involved his co-founder saying, I like the business that we have. And Gary going, I don't like the business that we have. And something had to give. Talk about that. That is a pivot. A pivot is not like a bunch of failed experiments. That's screwing up and thrashing around. Right? This is different.
Cool. Just by a real quick raise of hands, how many people have actually seen me do this presentation before? Okay.
20%.
Cool. So, I want to be mindful of time. I'm going to rush, quickly go through to set the context for some of the instrumentation, what Zennick is, where we came from, how we got our start. That way the rest of it will kind of make sense. So if you've already heard it, I apologize. I didn't think there would be so many repeat people today, so I didn't prepare any new material. But Zennick started started off as an actual class assignment, or an assignment for us class a few years ago, where I was in his undergrad entrepreneurship course. We were tasked with the assignment that we had to create 3 venture concepts. Is that still an assignment that MBA students do? So, one-page executive summaries, kind of outlining, 4 or 5 kind of major elements to this hypothesized business concept that we were thinking about. And one of mine was this idea for a watch concept. And the idea was super simple. It was, I grew up skateboarding in action sports, so I was really familiar with the consumer goods industry kind of attached to action sports, all the different brands. And there was a specific pain point in my life, which was in the watch market. I wanted to buy a watch, but the way in action sports, most of the brands in that space kind of fall in what I call the premium category, the $150 plus range. And I never, I was in junior high school, and even college student, never really had the cash to actually kind of invest in a watch through a brand that I supported. And so, basically my idea was like, I want to make watches for under $150. Like, it can't be that hard. Like, that was the idea. And I had a few hypotheses around how I could do that. The big kind of conjecture was that I was looking at what Vans shoes was doing at the time. How many of you guys are familiar with Vans and their product? Perfect. So they're a shoe company, and if you've known them for a while, you've probably recognized that they haven't released a single new SKU or a style in several years. Right? What do they do each season? They release a new material or a new colorway, and they just continue to kind of build out this product strategy on iteration, as opposed to introducing new shoes. And so my hypothesis was that if I could apply that to watches, instead of having to invest in new tooling and molds every season to release a watch, and just take maybe lock in on 4 or 5 styles that were proven that people will buy season to season, release new colors or do a new collaboration or new material, that we could kind of hack the underlying economic model and maybe compete at this lower price point. That was really it, and it was probably actually it was really simple. I still have the executive summary, and I'm actually kind of embarrassed to kind of go back and see how really simplistic and lame it was. But so that was my idea, and as part of this class, you have to actually go through and start actually kind of testing it and experiments and the whole kind of series of assignments that we go through in those classes. And I was 18 at the time. I was only halfway through Rob's class and still thinking exactly how we've been trained to think in terms of startups, which is what's the first thing you do when you have a startup idea? First, you're not qualified to build it, right? So you have to either go work in the industry for 5 years, or you have to go and talk to an expert and get mentors and things like that, right? So I was like, well, I don't want to go work for 5 years. I'm just going to go talk to a smart man's expert. And through the Foundry, got in touch with an owner of a local design agency whose clientele consists of several consumer goods companies in the action sports space. Skull Candy, Nixon, other companies like Roxy, Victoria's Secrets, do a lot of product development and packaging for these companies. And before the design agency, this guy was the same guy who founded Blindside, the skate shop Blindside here in Utah. So I was like, great, he knows action sports, he knows retailing, he knows product development. I'm gonna go talk to that guy and pitch him my idea. And I got sent an email. He took my first meeting, and then took 45 minutes to basically just systematically go through and tell me why my idea was doomed to fail. And
you're doing it wrong.
There's a series of junk punches, right? It was really painful. And basically, the anecdote that he gave me was, or example was, the Nike 6.0 case study, which if any of you guys are familiar with Nike, several years ago they released a skate shoe called 6.0 that has been pretty successful. And the reason why it's called the 6.0 is because it was their 6th attempt at breaking into the action sports market. And each attempt, took probably millions, about tens of millions of dollars, and time. Just the number of resources was vast, right? If Nike, with all the resources, the brand that they've already built, if they can't build an action sports company, on their first attempt. Who am I with, let me just set some background on myself, right? Like, I'm 18 years old, barely a sophomore in college. I think the longest job I've ever held was for like 3 or 4 months as an inside sales guy at a local company. No consumer goods experience, no manufacturing experience, no China experience. I don't speak Mandarin. Going back to Rob's, or just the number of reasons why I should not be starting this company was very close. And he was smart, experienced, and I believed him. And I walked away incredibly discouraged and didn't think about it for several months. Fast forward another semester, I'm in Rob's follow-up class to the entry-level entrepreneurship course. It is basically the equivalent of this class public. And part of that is we have to take the venture concepts that we kind of outlined in the first semester and actually start, continuing to execute on them, build experiments, and then kind of present on how we're iterating across those experiments. And I'm sitting in the back of the classroom, I'm on Facebook or Reddit, only half paying attention to all the dumb ideas being presented in class. And this kid who was in my class, Zach Park, who would eventually become my co-founder, walks up and brings in a bunch of these watches and has this presentation, which is almost like 95% identical to my presentation. It was really curious to see how we both came to very similar concepts. And but he had taken a different approach. He was a lot more of a hustler than I was at the time. And just was like, screw, trying to actually figure out the right way to do this. I'm just going to go and I'm going to go to Alibaba.com. The site that manufacturers can go and post products that they're willing to make for you at wholesale prices. And I'm just going to go find someone who's already making a watch that, based on my gut feel, would be appropriate for this market. And almost had the exact same pitch, which was, I went and surveyed, 50 of my friends, and I can buy this watch for $2, and because of my survey results, I can get this off for $30. Really simple pitch. And it was really interesting to, after his pitch, watch how everyone kind of responded to it. This eventually became a business, but at the time, everyone took a huge dump all over his idea, right? He even passed out a survey to everyone, so we even have the documented proof of everyone's rejection of the idea, which was, the watches are crap, we're never going to buy this, the colors are wrong, the price is wrong, every reason why we felt they were confirming the survey results. And so he too walked away pretty discouraged after that.
Customers cannot tell you what they want. Experts cannot evaluate the business.
That and surveys are a horrible, horrible experiment unless done, very well. So he too walked away discouraged. And I think another few months went by. At the time, he joined the Foundry around the same time I had joined the Foundry, maybe a month or two before he did. And so we knew each other, we were aware of each other, but we were independently working on our own startups. I did a research consulting business for a few months, and he went on to do a software startup business. And after a few months, both of those kind of died away, and we started having coffee every Friday, just kind of talking. We knew because we had worked with each other a little bit at the Foundry that we wanted to do something together. And we came back to the watch idea. We were still really kind of butthurt around everyone, telling us that it was a bad idea, and we still really believed it. And what we ended up doing was outlining a series of 3 experiments to try and actually test whether or not this was an interesting concept. So instead of asking someone if they thought it would work or if they would buy it or invest in it, we were like, we're just going to go try and see if we can prove that it will work through actually testing it. And the first experiment was we used Instagram as a testing platform. And the reason why Instagram, there's a few reasons why we chose Instagram. And the big one being that in the time between us presenting the concept and to this guy, this super successful expert dude, and the class, between that time and the time we actually revisited the idea, Instagram had came along and had become incredibly successful in terms of user adoption rates. So there was a significant number of people using Instagram. whereas before this, that didn't exist. So we couldn't have ran this experiment even 3 or 4 months before this. And because we're both playing around with Instagram, we noticed this really interesting characteristic to Instagram, which is their search engine and how it was set up. Basically, the way it was set up was you can use their search engine, sitting on top of Instagram, to identify users based on who they're following, who's following them, the type of content they're uploading. We're determining that through hashtags. All these characteristics can be, you can search in the search engine. So if I wanted, for example, to target 10,000 skateboarders, I could go and find another brand that had, that was in the skate space that had skateboards following them. Pull up those people, and I could have a big list of all of those customers. Or I could search for all the people using skateboard hashtag or skateboard related hashtags and pull up those lists of people and their profiles. And then what we could do is we could take those existing samples that Zach had already received from the factory, and give you an idea on how he actually secured those samples. Was he contacted the factory online through Alibaba, requesting samples, and asked for them to send their defects. And most factories will have defects laying around that they, especially if it's a private label or private label good that they've already used in the past, will have defects sitting around. Slight miscolorations or whatever reason, but for all intents and purposes, it looked like the product would look like when it was built right or to the wall. So he just had them send free defects to us. It didn't cost them anything. They had to build it. So that's how we kind of secured free samples in the first place. Took photos of those, really poor photography as you can tell, just using the iPhone. Uploaded them to Instagram, and then just started following people using that method I just described, the search engine. And what we did, at the time was we're like, well, we think, the skate market is the right market for this watch just based on gut feel, backgrounds as, the skate world. But we don't really know that. So what we're going to do is, instead of only following skateboarders, we're going to kind of identify, say, 1,000 skateboarders, follow those 1,000 people over the course of an hour or two, and then just step back and watch to see what would happen. When someone follows you on Instagram, get a little push notification on your phone, notifying you that someone's following you. So we would follow them, they would be notified of it, so they would pull it up, kind of upload or load the app up and see that we're following them. And then in some cases they would follow us back. Based on the content on the profile, the description of the photo, 3 or 4 different characteristics that we could match and custom. And we would do that with skateboarders for an hour, and then kind of hold off for a few hours to see what that follow back rate was. Right? So if we follow 1,000 people, what percentage of those people will follow us back? And then what percentage of those that follow us back will like a photo, comment on it, and engage with us at a deeper level and just follow us back. So we write down those numbers, kind of wait a few hours to kind of let that settle down. That was about the highest level of rigor we're applying to this. We're just back in napkin time, jotting things down, writing them down.
But the experiment is clear, right? The experiment is the metric is follow back rate and interaction. So if they follow you back, that's good. If they like the photo, that's good. That's another interaction. If they comment, that's good. And you're doing it by segment.
By the way, how's the pacing? Am I speaking too fast?
Good.
Cool. Yeah, so we would do that with skateboarders, follow 1,000 skateboarders, follow back those, or write down those metrics. And then we would target, say, 1,000 people that were living in San Francisco working at startups, like in the technology scene. There was a large number of those people that were following, the celebrity technology founders, like Kevin Rose or those types of guys. We would follow their followers and write down that follow back rate, or following women, those sorts of things. And pretty quickly we were able to confirm our suspicion, which was that skate was, at least in terms of fallback rates, the appropriate audience to pursue. And here's a couple screenshots. You can see some of the comments that people are leaving. They're not only following us, they're liking the photos. They're asking where they can buy them for how much. So at this point, I think only a few days had gone by, and our determining the reason why we moved on from here was that basically we were happy there's no number that we were looking for, right? We didn't know what the appropriate fallback rate or comments level, or the number of likes we needed. We just felt that was like, all right, well, to put another week or two into testing this, what the weekers, what's happening here definitely warrants us spending another week or two to pursue it. So that was, the level of, that was all I was really going on at the time. So from there, the next step for us was to see if we can actually take this audience that we were curating on Instagram and this level of engagement that we're seeing and kind of convert it to traffic elsewhere, potentially where they can actually use the credit card and a hypothetical transaction. So from there, we built a really simple 2-page website. At this point, we have to pull out a credit card, pay $8 for a domain name, but then we just used, I think just a free template from either WordPress or Weebly or Squarespace. About a half dozen various free online sources you can use to build a website like this in a couple of hours. And it was a really simple website. First page, the same, really horrible photography from the Instagram account. And add to cart link beneath each photo and then a price next to each photo. And then we would go back to Instagram, upload a photo, include the URL in the submission, and then launch using Google Analytics, which I'll show you guys in a few minutes. A free service provided by Google that allows you to track what's going on your site in terms of traffic and where that traffic's coming from. Let's see what would happen. Would they click the URL on Instagram, or would they come to the website? Would they click add to cart? Which color would they choose if we, change the whether or not white was on top or on the bottom? We changed how we arrange the colors on the website. How would that affect conversions? If we change pricing, how does that affect our conversion? What's the optimal price to get the max value out of the visit?
Is that over a course of days, weeks?
Yeah, a few days. Yeah, it was. We're doing this over Christmas break.
The time frame from experiment to launch is this over Christmas.
Yeah.
So
I'm just at home in Colorado with the parents, just at the dining table. Just,
so everything that's happening so far happens over like a 21-day period.
Yeah.
That's how long it took to figure this thing out. So note, you didn't build the massive e-commerce back-end or expensive photography. It's the party rock strategy, right? One party rock shoe strategy. 2 pages, one of them you vary, the other one says, oh, so sorry. Don't have those awesome watches that you want.
Yeah. And so, we just start tracking all those conversion rates, trying to get an idea of, hinting at, poking at what that economic frontier would be. If we're using Instagram as the way to generate traffic, to build that audience, how much traffic can we throw out this website, and what are those conversion rates, and how does that influence the number of dollars that we can actually generate, in a given time frame. And so, if I remember correctly, after maybe 3 or 4 days of doing this, we generated close to 400 emails, just slightly over 400 emails. And at that point, we're doing the math, which is, the factory has given us information around a minimum order quantity. I think we had ordered 2,000 at the time at $2 a piece. Right? So we have to, it was 1,000 minimum order quantity at $2 a piece. So we needed $2,000 to make that purchase. And we have enough, call them proxy sales or transactions, right? Not quite a credit card, but the closest thing we can get to a credit card, which is this full submission. And we're like, all right, well, we've, in our opinion, sufficiently de-risked this that we're going to take the next step and actually try and get closer to getting that credit card from customers. Which at the time was launching a really simple Kickstarter campaign. And, at the time Kickstarter was, super easygoing about the types of projects they would accept, because we had a very, very, very poor, video and pitch. Like the entire thing was built in under 24 hours using PowerPoint and screen capture software, and just a voiceover, transcription of our pitch. And that was our video. Basically, we were just selling products, in terms of pre-selling products. How many of you guys are familiar with Kickstarter? This is great.
Yeah,
A year and a half ago.
last year, a year and a half ago, we did this same presentation, same class. It was like 6 people knew what Kickstarter was.
Yeah. So maybe we'll learn to people that don't understand Kickstarter. It's an online site that allows you to, if I have some kind of creative endeavor that I want to do but needs funding, I can solicit funding from the larger community on Kickstarter. And the way I incentivize those early backers to get me money is through a number of different rewards that I can set. So in this case, we want to build a product. We're willing to give you guys a discounted version of that product if you're willing to fund us and wait 3 months to get the product, so we can manufacture it. We raised in 30 days, which I think we launched it says. But I think it funded the first or second week of January. So we launched over Christmas break, raised $6,500 over 30 days.
Why did your goal is 5,000? Is that what that says?
Yeah, $5,000.
So where'd you come up with that? Is that just for fun?
So the actual inside joke behind this this project was that we, even though
So the question of why did you set it for $5,000?
So usually I won't tell us as part of the presentation, but the real reason why we started doing Zennick in the first place, not only out of our curiosity to try to test this, but was that he and I had started working on a software startup together, and had built out a bunch of wireframes for this application we wanted built. Got in touch with the same guys, a group overseas in Pakistan that had built up the first rendition of Minx.com, and they quoted out kind of the first minimally viable version of this application that we had a wireframe for $3,000. And so we were doing this to raise money for that. We needed $2,000 to fulfill the orders, but we needed $3,000 to fulfill this other project. So that's where $5,000 came from. Does that help?
Helps.
So
the big lesson is always be hustling. It's just right there.
So we raised $6,500, and then immediately upon closing, there's another similar crowdfunding site called Indiegogo. A little less widely known as Kickstarter, but still actually pretty popular. Basically the same premise as Kickstarter, but they're a lot more loose in terms of the rules that they have that they accept. And so immediately after closing on here, we're like, why can't we just take our video, change out Kickstarter for Indiegogo, put it on that site, and see if we can raise some extra money while we're manufacturing, placing our order. And we raised another $3,000 to $4,000 over the next 30 days just by doing that and not really thinking much about it. So that was really kind of the genesis of Zennick, kind of how we started. We launched shortly afterwards.
Excuse me, how did you come up with the name?
So back to the surveys that when Zach came in with the surveys, he had brainstormed a bunch of names. I can't remember exactly how he picked them out, but I had a list of 12 names that he was playing around with. And, asked the class which name they thought was the close one. Zennick was the most, easily voted for this mission. And we didn't really care about in the beginning, we weren't setting out to build a company. We're trying to fund this other, we're trying to do imagine children actually fund this project over here. And we weren't setting out to build a brand. We didn't have a logo, we didn't have packaging, we didn't have a website, we didn't have cool photography, we didn't have any of the things traditionally associated with actually building a brand, much less a company. So yeah. So basically, what happened shortly after was that we launched a legitimate site, right? So finally put our big boy pants on. We're like, all right, we probably need a legitimate website to take transaction on. So that, we're like, all right, we're able to drive traffic through Instagram to the site, even though we're still going to take this money and try and fund this other project. There's no reason why we shouldn't launch a site, buy a either develop or buying a bot that will just follow people automatically, so we don't have to do it by hand anymore. We can just rake in the cash and continue to fund this other project. So we launched the site. We launched it March 19th, And basically this is over the next 3 months, so basically the quarter after we launch, kind of what's actually going on the website. And
That looks really expensive.
no, so this is Google Analytics. How many of you guys have actually used Google Analytics before?
So you guys all know the joke thing. 'Cause normally it's
Yeah.
right. Normally, because I'm supposed to play the straight man and all those things, and I'm like, oh, and so that's when you got like professional photography and like did this awesome logo design. No. Oh, that's when you spent like $8 million on your e-commerce backend. No, that would be really bad.
Yeah, I think if what we used was Shopify, if any of you guys are curious. And it's basically the WordPress for e-commerce. So really easy out of the box, template solutions for e-commerce related websites. And they basically just have a field that you go and copy a little snippet of code from Google Analytics, copy it over. You don't even have to touch the HTML. So it's very non-technical person friendly in terms of setting this up. So if you guys are already pretty familiar with Google Analytics, I don't know how much you guys are going to dive into this stuff. To be honest, I didn't come prepared with too much of a can walkthrough of this, so we can kind of
So
delve in.
I'm curious. I have one question. If you can think back to like the first quarter, what were the things that emerged using Google Analytics that surprised you, that influenced your?
So there's a couple really interesting things that emerged from just tracking this, and we're still not really very sophisticated around actually what we should be tracking and what it means and the interpretation of that. But I'll try and walk you guys best through what our thought process was. So right here is an overlay of the first 3 months after launch of revenue. So this is tracking revenue over 3 months, divided by whether it's revenue through mobile traffic, referral traffic, coming to another website, search traffic, through Google, Bing, Yahoo, so on, or direct traffic, people going directly to our website by typing in Google. And put that here since it's easier. So there were a few things that we were really interested in why we were kind of breaking them down into these 4 categories to measure. The first was our e-commerce conversion rate. So, even after we launched and had a call it a legitimate website, it's still very simple. It was just a slightly more polished version of screenshots I sort of recruited. Right? Watches were still 4 colors displayed in a 2x2 grid, add to cart buttons beneath each one. And it was, you click on it, very simple description, add a cart, and then you would pay through PayPal. So not a lot of steps, not a lot of room for confusion, throughout that process. But there's still, probably a half dozen characteristics or aspects of the site that we could play with. We could still play around with pricing, we could play around with whether or not better photography increased the sales, whether or not a certain description, increased the conversion. But then we also wanted to make sure we wanted to see, because our site looks differently on mobile versus regular desktop, to make sure we're separating out those two as controls for these tasks. So that's why we're breaking it down this way. So you can see it was very that if it's a visitor coming from search traffic was actually a substantially higher percentage. There's about a 30% higher chance that they will convert to a sale. Which at the time we're like, well, we don't really know what that means, but that's interesting. What about that, right, is causes someone who is searching for us? Well, maybe it's because if they're searching for us, they've already discovered us before through a referral or through social. So since they already know us, they're intentionally going back to us. So that's maybe why there's a higher conversion rate. So you can start to kind of like poke and prod at what could actually be happening. The second really interesting thing is this average value section right here. I mentioned, I actually didn't mention earlier, but part of my original write-up for Rob's class was, if we followed this band's model for developing the product, what my hypothesis was that we would see that even though the average price of the watch was $30, that because of the price and emphasis on colors and materials that the average purchase value per customer would actually be higher than $30. Meaning that people want to collect watches, they want to buy multiple watches, they want to mix and match colors. So that was one of our original, kind of hypotheses or assumptions. So it was interesting to see that even though our watch at the time I think was retailing for $27, the average purchase value, which was pretty uniform across all 4 channels, was about $42. So about 1.5 watches, which is kind of cool. Then you could, even dive deeper into let's separate out U.S. or North American sales versus international sales, and the average purchase value would go up if we looked at international versus North American, because higher shipping rates, so they would try and spread out the higher shipping rates across multiple products. Let's see, I don't know if any of these also are interesting. Kind of comparing down here, what products, what colors are selling better across each of the channels. So it's pretty consistent that black is about 40 to 45% across all 4 channels. White is about 25. And then red, silver is all pretty standard. Is that helpful, by the way? Is that?
Have you shipped anything at this point?
Yes. So we launched the site within like a few days of us actually getting products and sales. So Kickstarter was funded January, call it second week of January. We placed an order maybe a week or 2 later because it took some time to get the funds from Kickstarter. And then production was about 30 days plus another week for shipping, and then another week to figure out actually how to ship everything to people in terms of materials and stuff. And then time after that, so that's almost March, maybe a week or 2 to get the size and get all that over.
Were you doing this out of apartment?
Apartments.
And you had to go and procure the right packaging?
Yeah, we just used a supplier called Uline. Just to order envelopes, and we're doing this in Foundry. We just have all the watches display, printing, shipping labels, and just doing it ourselves and driving to the post office every 2 years.
And after 3 months, it was clear if you put a certain amount of money in for advertising, you got a certain amount of traffic, and you got a certain number of conversions, all of which became normalized, which resulted in a certain number of watches getting sold, which resulted in a certain margin and profit, and the business was stable.
Yeah, I think we had 88% gross margins, and very close to net margins, like 80%. It was very profitable business.
This is the question of the pivot, right? So now we have this business. It's a machine. It's exactly what you want to. Now, from a lean startup perspective, it's a machine. You put $1 in, and you got $4 out. So, 2 founders. One founder is like, I like this business. It kicks off cash. It kicks off enough cash for us to pay our rent for me to travel. I think we should just continue to. It was basically the 4-hour work week strategy. Let's just administer this thing remotely. You, Gary, stay home and handle the packaging. I'm going to go get on a boat and fly and get on a hot air balloon or do whatever. And Gary had larger designs for the business.
Yeah, so I mean, in the next 3 months, and ever since the business, at least looking at where we came from, very little expectations. We generated, just slightly over $25,000. And exactly as Rob mentioned, my co-founder and I, we're basically just coasting for 3 months, just kicking back, I'm
and they thought they were all bad. They're just like, yeah, we're pretty awesome. And they're hanging out and showing up at the foundry. So how much money did we make today? We're hitting refresh on Shopify while the other foundry kids are slogging. Oh, I just made $3,000 right now. I'm not doing anything. It was great. It's exactly what you hope for, right? It's just I'm making money right now. Right now, I just log into Mint. I'm my money is making money. Life is good.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. We bought a box for $50 that we could just set some parameters around how to follow people and stuff like that. That bot would just go away and work 24 hours a day and follow tens of thousands of people. They would follow us back. They go to the website and then buy. It was stupid how easy it was to just sit back and how skateboarding full time, 8 hours a day. It was
So you can do, by the way, was it last year? Yeah, so last year, at this point, some guy, I won't name, who was at the Foundry, who got laid off from his company, his large Myriad Genetics company, who I told this story, heard this and was just like, F that. Actually, he didn't say that because he's the loudest thing. He was like, oh my goodness, I'm gonna.
Good golly.
I was like, but he was just like epically excited and was like, he got laid off that day. So this is a great. You mind if I tell this story? Gets laid off that day, comes in, right, and he's barely holding it together. This is one of the coolest things about this class ever. He's keeping it together. He's got a stiff upper lip, right, but he's been working at Myriad for like 20 years, like, and he gets laid off. He's my age, like, and he has kids and stuff. He's barely hanging on. Sees this presentation and goes, that kid did that. I can do this. Like, I can do this. And went out to Alibaba and found bamboo iPad covers. And replicated that thing. Just took that, said Control C, Control V, and created nothing new, right? And I saw him again at the last Foundry Shindig, and it was just like, I was like, how's it going? He's like, it's really hard, and all this stuff. And then he's like, but you know, it's amazing. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm like monitoring my sales while I'm playing with my kids in the backyard. It's the greatest things that ever happened to me. And I was just like so moved by that. And the reason I share it with you guys is like, you guys can walk away and go to Alibaba and do this right now. Like, in your spare time, over spring break metaphorically. There's nothing that prevents this from occurring. I've seen this happen at least 6, 7 times. Every time this happens, 7 people will just be like, screw this, and they'll come back and they'll be like, we were doing this, and then we saw Gary's presentation, and we just dropped all that stuff and got like flimsical whiteboard covers, and we sold them on the internet. We made money at the end, right? And that's the so it's cool.
Yeah. So
25 grand, 3 months. Gary's skateboarding every day on his mini ramp, making fun of other people.
Hey, can I ask just a quick question here? Yeah. Rob's point, going to Alibaba and doing this. Yeah, maybe you're going to talk about this, but the difficulty in getting someone from Alibaba to actually respond to you.
yeah, it's non-trivial, right? But you'll have to send probably 200 emails before you get one response and stuff like that. But the alternative is jumping on a plane, going to China, going to a trade show, talking to factories, and we didn't even know we could do that at the time.
Yeah, so I posted an article in Canvas, the assignments about, I did my watch company, blah, 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 with some kid who has the advanced technology version of Gary Jent's, which is he just got on a plane, went to Shenzhen, found an electronics store, Control C, Control V, and he's doing it.
Yeah, his Kickstarter campaign right now is live, and it's like 300 grand off of a sourced wooden watch.
You guys,
It's like facepalm.
yeah, he went to China, found a wood grain watch, and went super sweet, ran a Kickstarter campaign, made $300,000, BM.
And the video something was just like, seeing front cameras like, yeah, I just really wanted I liked the wooden watch and just went to a trade show. Just made it.
He's not a like Rhodes Scholar. But he has something that I didn't have, which was just will. The will to send. What separates me from Gary is the will to do 200 emails. That's it.
But is this interesting?
Yes.
It's already in place. Let me know if you guys don't find it interesting. So at this time, we're just coasting by, 2 to 3, maybe 4 hours of real work a week, just in, customer service, keep everything, from crashing brain, just really, shipping watches. And, we start talking about, we have, $20-something thousand in the bank, what should we do with that? Do we continue doing the same thing? Maybe we should build new products. Well, we don't know how to do that. What does that look like? We should talk all the basic questions you can imagine started popping up in terms of what do we do now? And we just disagreed on everything. We didn't agree on anything. And I wanted to, I grew up skateboarding. This was a demographic, a market. Whatever you call it, that I, had a passion about. I wanted to build an actual brand that I would have made. proud to have represented it as a skateboard. Right? That was what I wanted to do. I wanted to learn how to build a product. I wanted to build something that we could put our name on and be happy about, and be proud to sell to our friends. We just had the source wash that had a really high failure rate. You know, friends would come and offer to buy it from me. I'm like, I'll just give it to you for free. I don't want your money. Because it wasn't something I felt really good about selling. And my partner, you know, he was just like, no, I'm just going to travel. I'm going to go put, you know, a down payment on the house and rent it out. And just like, you know, took, you know, Timothy Ferris's playbook and just wanted to apply it in this case. We didn't agree on it. And then basically I was like, all right, you know, I really want to do this. You know, I'll just basically take all that cash in the bank and give it to you if you'll just leave. And that's basically what we did. You know, bought them off for about 20 grand at the time. And, you know, then I have, and so.
So it's like 6 months of work, right?
Not 4 months.
Yeah,
so
so
it's 6 months work, yes.
4 months of work, they part, it's awesome, right? He has an entire company, the other guy's got 20 grand, high five.
And to take a step back, you know, on why we really disagreed, which was, if you look at our business, you know, I bet, you know, any one of you will be able to identify the big risk with this business, right? You know,
Fat. Or could be a fat.
Exactly. You know, we were basically spamming Instagram too. It's all built off of Instagram. Right? This, you know, this really is a project. It's not a company. It's there's just a number of really, you know, this wasn't going to last very long, right? And so, you know, what happened? You know, our boss was relying on the fact that Instagram, because they were so young, growing so quickly, only had limited developers. You know, wasn't thinking about what happens when people realize that they can do what we're doing and just spam the crap out of Instagram. There were no limits on their API in terms of how many calls it can make. You know, which was, you know, the API is how we're actually, the bot is communicating with Instagram to do all stuff. So what would happen when Facebook acquires Instagram and then 2 weeks later they put a limit on it to 200 an hour? You know, and our model relies on us being able to do, you know, say 2,000 to 3,000 actions an hour. You know, what would you expect to happen?
Well, I'll show you what happened with the first one.
Basically, you know, this is a 6 month view. And you can see that we did 33 over 6 months, right? So over the next 3 months, we only did 8 grand, right? So basically, just chopped our revenue in a third, right? Yeah, this is 3 months after I just bought my girlfriend. And this was where our argument was, which was I was arguing to him. I was like, look, this isn't sustainable. You know, we have all this cash in the bank. We need to figure out, you know, either are we okay with this being a project, or do we want to actually make a company out of this? And, you know, be okay with the fact that in a couple months, you know, this line of business is just going to be dead, right? It's not going to be operating at what it is right now. We just got lucky. That's really what it is. We just, you know, ignorantly got, you know, just timed it perfect, right? It was all luck. And, you know, I wanted to take that money and actually see if we could build, because I still thought there were some interesting things that we had generated. We had a social following of 50,000 people that we didn't spend dollars for. Right? That's pretty powerful, the fact that we have 50,000 people, you know, anytime we're pushing something out online, there's still value in it, right? And there was a number of, we were talking to these customers, you know, we had athletes, distributors, we had accounts all reaching out to us asking if they could place orders, but we didn't have the infrastructure to support that.
So I love that metric, because that whole thing shows transactions just scaled down to fit the bot, fit the new, right? Basically, terms of service changed. You couldn't make all the API calls. You went an order of magnitude down. Your average order value stayed the same, and the only thing that changed was the number of referrals you could make. The machine just got throttled, right? Instagram just throttled your machine. Said you don't get 1,000 an hour, you get 200 an hour, and everything the machine did exactly what should happen.
And so to Rob's earlier point, you know, I made a decision around, you know, based on that, there was a pretty small, you know, short, the economic frontier on this company was pretty small, right? Like, maybe this thing will spin off $50,000 to $60,000 a year in cash. You know, there's questions about how sustainable that would be year to year, but this was a $50,000 project, right? I could be totally happy with that. But at the time, you know, previous to doing Zennick, I thought I would do software stuff, right? You know, I graduated school and moved out to San Francisco, you know, either work as an early employee at a software company or something. And it was really interesting to actually start working with hard goods. It gave me the opportunity to start talking to people that were manufacturing and thinking hard about this stuff, which opened up this really interesting community of people in Salt Lake City that I really enjoyed working with. So, all else being equal, I just wanted to use this as an opportunity to figure out how to, actually, how to manufacture in China, what it takes to build a brand, what it takes to build a team of sales reps to move into retail, which is what I wanted to do because I thought the economic frontier on retail would be much bigger. So it opened up a lot of interesting paths for me in terms of what I was interested personally in. So, I've largely spent the last year now ignoring revenue and trying to build an online business. Instead, I've been focusing on how to build an actual team and business to get retail right now. We're getting close. This is a little old, but I've now built a team that including me, and 7 employees. Myself, a new co-founder who was the second designer in Skull Candy, his former boss, who was employee number 1 at Skull Candy, and art director there for 8 years. All the way to IPO. We got named P to Skull Candy's current industrial designer for the last 3 years. Who before that was at Vestal, a big watch company in our space for 5 years. Who, while they built out a private labeling watch business for them, where he would go and build watches for other brands that wanted to have a watch category, including Vans shoes, Paul Frank, and a dozen other watch businesses. And before that, he was Fossil's very first director of industrial design for the first 8 years in that business, and managed products until he made that company.
So why in the world did they all flock to you?
Good question. So there's a couple of answers to that I'm just kind of guessing. The first is that every one of these guys this would probably they've done at least 2 startups before this. Most of them have an IPO under the belt, or in the case of my co-founder, in addition to Skull Candy, was there for worked at Logo Works. And that was a part of my HP. So all these guys just really world-class people, but what they never had the opportunity to do at each of these startups was to completely own whatever line of business they were engaged in. So whether it was product or creative or art or whatever it was, they always had someone else really kind of dictating that. So whether it was a really hands-on CEO that they didn't like, or someone just wants to have above them. So they never had the opportunity to actually build the watch that they wanted to build, right? Or to build the brand that they wanted to build. The designers have largely been freelancing for the last couple of weeks, and we're getting tired of just doing a bunch of client work. We wanted to build something again. And Pete, to get him on board, which is like, my pitch to him was, I don't want to own product. I want you to own product. I want to, as long as you kind of stay within these constraints, because it affects the rest of our business, you have complete great control over that product. And I think that was enough to get him in. And then, in addition to rather generous equity offers. But none of these guys are paying cash. It's all equity, 3-year vesting schedules. Restricted stock, and basically I was willing to give over control that another founder may not have been able to. So far, and then Michael Spencer, this 4th guy, he was a professional free skier in his 20s, left that, retired from that to start representing other athletes in actual sports in terms of sponsorships and endorsements. Sold that company that he started to Washington Yeager, a really large sports marketing agency that does the same thing in the last year. So he's come on board to do all our sports marketing and his dad. Another girl that, Johanna from the Foundry, who was a kind of our go-to accountant at the Foundry in the early days, who had a small accounting business, putting her on for operations, and then another guy who we haven't closed the deal yet, but who was looking really good. An ex-Oakley guy who was there for 10 years managing their international sales, who now works for another brand called Freestyle, which is a rather large Geneva watch brand that's in the surf world, to come on as our sales executive. Really great something. So, we're probably 2 months away from finalizing the product for our holidays, 2013 holiday season launch this year. We'll be launching with 5 new lines that are designed from scratch, with our new factories, which are basically fossils factories, So by growing Kedon, we got access to fossils factories. Works because we have a 15-year relationship with that factory now. What they're willing to do for us, which is really key to going back to our original hypothesis goal, which is to build watches for this $100 printer. What I learned actually when China and talking factories and actually doing all that, which is just the basic economics around watch building. It's really hard to build a watch that's decent quality, $100, that's scale, unless you're just sourcing product. And I didn't have to source product. But because of our relationships, what our factory is going to do is to waive all of our tooling, molding, and basically sample costs, all of our, basically what would have been a CapEx budget for any other startup in this space, we don't have to, it's completely waived for us. Just because of that relationship, we're willing to take on those costs themselves as a factory.
Yeah, this is a question for Rob too. Professor J. Barr, what would he say of the competitive advantage of your business? Like what is the secret sauce, or what is the competitive advantage?
So Jay saw this presentation a year ago. He basically shat his pants. Right? So if you're a strategy guy, none of this makes any sense.
No.
And he loved it, right? He ended up corralling Gary for over dinner at Fresco, just punished him into a corner, and worked out all the issues that came out of that going, none of the physics inside a large business related to competitive advantage or all the other things that we talk about traditional strategy, that model in the nascent entrepreneurial framework, those constructs do not map carefully. Said another way, people who are trained in traditional corporate strategy, e.g. traditional MBAs, finance people, who then get jobs doing stuff and attempt to analyze nascent firms using traditional strategic lenses, fail to understand the underlying phenomenon. What's different about Jay is, despite the fact that he literally wrote the book on strategy, because he did, Jay thought this was really cool, and he and Gary have been talking, and how they sort of talk about it is, everything that Gary has done up until roughly this point was uninteresting, but it is curious that Gary's sitting in on classes, and the classes that he's sitting in on is Jay's strategy class, because now that he has a business, things like competitive advantage, diversification, sourcing, all transaction stuff now apply. It didn't apply up until when, roughly?
The last 2 or 3 months.
Yeah. So the entire time up until 2 or 3 months, the physics of this business did not lend itself to being analyzed using traditional strategic management lenses. What's exceptional about Jay is that Jay figured that out in one conversation with Gary. He'd never seen anything like this before, right? This just did not compute. No one sees, this is very new, right? This whole way of doing it is new. So Jay encountered it, he was just like, that was cool.
Yeah. It's not to say that that stuff's obsolete or irrelevant. Right?
No, it's just not applicable in the earliest stage.
I would agree with that. But I mean, we're thinking really hard about. So to answer your question, what if I understand correctly, is if you're looking at us, what is our competitive advantage? How are we thinking about it? So there's maybe 2 or 3 answers to that. First being our relationship. Manufacturing in China is largely driven through relationships. It's really hard for someone to replicate a 15-year relationship like that. Yep. Especially as a startup. And so then you ask yourself, okay, the only people with that, there's probably 2 companies in the space that can come close to replicating that, Nixon and Vistal. And both of which we got a lot of insight into. First being that Pete, used to work at Vistal, so knows exactly how a company thinks about product and business, and knows that it's basically that big shit show we have. And then they've received several offers to basically sell a company, but the books are so bad and poorly managed, and they don't care about what we're doing in terms of the price that we're going after. That we're just as a company have decided that we're not going to worry about them as a competitor, and we know Nixon because they're clients of this design agency, and know that they are completely uninterested in under $100 space. That they value themselves as a premium brand, and build their image and product, and all those decisions around strategy are geared towards being a premium brand. they want to increase the value of the launches, not decrease them. So, that's how we're thinking about it. So we're largely thinking, in terms of new startups, we have that kind of locked in. And then around other ways of how we're competing, because when it comes down to it, when we want to actually be successful in retail, we will have to make the case to a purchaser for either a major account like Zoomies or Pakistan Utilities, or to even a small skate shop that they should take it, reduce their budget that they spend on our competitors, makes them install math and apply some portion of that to us. And then over time, increase the percentage of allocation that they're giving us, right? Because that's the reality of it, is that we're going to have to basically outperform those other products in the retail environment at such a drastic level that they're willing to season to season increase the dollars they're spending on us. And the way we're thinking about that problem is through a combination of how we actually basically merchandise the watch in the store in terms of packaging, point of purchase displays, different things like that. We think there's a lot of room for us to kind of innovate on how a watch actually gets sold. So if you go on Zennick inside of a retail account and count the number of steps that a person that walks into the store has to go through on a watch, it's like 6 or 7. You have to walk in, you have to find the glass cabinet with all the watches behind, you have to identify the watch that you want to try on, you have to go to the floor rack, it's probably busy putting a skateboard together in the back because they're understaffed. Get them to actually go and walk the cabinet, try on the watch, decide if they want to buy it, kind of do that intricate dance between the floor rep trying to upsell them and convince them to buy it, the guy being cautious about it. Finally decide to buy it, go get the packaging in the back. Just you think about how actually difficult it is to sell a watch inside, given those constraints. And we're thinking about basically merchandising watches the same way as headphones are merchandise, because that's basically our background for the team's background. We think we have a number of assumptions that have yet to be proven that if we, package watches a certain way, merchandise in a certain way, the way we incentivize our sales reps and how we actually build the sales programs for on the account side, how we actually build those contracts can play a big difference. And then also some of the marketing tools in terms of, collaborations and partnerships and stuff like that. So there's kind of a lot of different ways we're trying to think about that. We don't have an answer yet, but we think there's a way that we can keep on the manufacturing side and on the merchandising side.
When you guys were starting out here, did you use Rockwell at all as an analog or?
Yeah, so I get this question quite a bit. So for those of you guys who are unfamiliar with Rockwell, they are another watch brand actually here in Utah. I think they just got in Sandy. We are actually in a very similar space to us. And this is probably going to be a lot of basically very opinionated. But if you look at Rockwell and their business, I'm not so concerned about them for a number of reasons, but they are a useful analog. The first is that they source all their products instead of designing it. The second is that they're also kind of going after that premium market. So if you look at the average price point of the watch, it's $300 or $400. The accounts they're targeting are a lot different than us. So they're building a brand off of targeting a moto, motocross, MMA, dirt racing, like that crowd instead of the kind of traditional fashion skate crowd. So that they're going after different accounts in there. So they're, moto shops, car dealerships, jewelry shops. Today I drove by a trophy shop that had Rockwell in it. And so I have a trophy shop, right? So you just think in terms of brand equity, how sustainable is a brand that's trying to appeal to another audience when you're selling a trophy store, right? And part of that is if you actually look at how that business is organized, it's split into two organizations. There is the organization that the founder of the brand runs. Basically, is the marketing arm of the organization that they're really good at, showing up with the truck, getting a lot of, attractive girls, dress a certain way, go to the moto events, and just being dudes, right? So they can market it. And then they basically license their brand and the rights to sell their product to another group. So there's, in fact, they approached my co-founder a month ago to do their catalogs for the trade show season this spring. So we actually have a lot of insight to how they're thinking about it. And, they're doing a lot of similar things to us, but we're not too concerned about it.
You should mention that you told your co-founder you're not working with is in fact doing the catalogs.
Yeah.
Right. So just on the competition side, right? So here's a guy whose co-founder is now working with your competitor, and that doesn't occur as getting asked, right? That occurs as awesome. I know shit ton more about my competitor than
That's the best
any-
catalog guy.
Yeah. So there's just more kind of proof points about how I tend to think about this problem.
I mean, those are great guys. I've met them, and they're doing really well. From what I can tell, they're in terms of revenue and growth, they're doing really well. So they've kind of carved out this nice niche for them, but we're kind of there's lots of similarities. Not too. I think when everything plays out, we won't be competitive.
So when you started out, you sourced through China. Did you do a dropship model? It sounds like the website was it a dropship model from China, or did you bulk order and then dropship here yourself?
Yeah, bulk order. They ship to us, and we just fulfill them. We still do it a year later. Basically out of our office.
Did you guys just store it in your apartment first?
Yeah, I mean, boxes don't take up a lot of space.
Right.
Fit. We didn't have packaging either, too. Right? I'm still embarrassed about how we actually merchandise.
They just give you a cardboard box, you open it up, and there's just like watches in there.
But like, you could
should-
fit
you
2,000
should-
watches easily on this counter, like 2 by 2, like 3 stacked high. So we just shipped them over. It was really cheap. We received a bill 2 weeks later for customs for a couple $100. It was really easy.
Just to follow up, so while you've been getting this team together, what has happened with your sales? Because obviously it doesn't seem like you've been introducing new product, right? This thing has just kind of been floating along as you're trying to transition to take it to a bigger scale. So what has happened?
So we maybe do $1,000 a month now. We don't really push it or prepare to push it. It's there to generate that small amount of revenue. There's fun, number of activities like going out to the Magic Fashion Trade Show last week to other companies that to just do on the ground research at the trade shows, stuff like that. And we've been attempting to raise finance for a couple months now, and it's proven really difficult. But at the same time, because of our relationship with the factory, we can get products done for free, which is just amazing. Right? We don't have to pay for samples. So we'll be able to get another 2 or 3 months on the road and get a product done. If the sales guy does come on board, and we have products, we can basically take care of all the other assets pretty cheaply that we'll need to actually go outside the product. So we can do photography, we can do catalogs, our factory will do packaging and just vice versa. So we can build all that out on cheap, and then go and secure purchase orders through our sales guy and his relationships, and borrow against those purchase orders for inventory purchases if we have to.
Now that you've kind of lined up on what the company's going to be, how much testing do you do?
So this is the conversation that.
Is it?
So not a whole lot. This is actually the conversation that Rob and I have been trying to kind of play around.
And actually, given the time, I'm going to leave that as the final question, also because it's the most interesting one for now. Just so.
You not want to answer?
No, please. I want you to answer. This is the interesting frontier. Now we're even off script. Is.
So the short answer is none, and I don't know how I feel about this. The longer answer is, kind of pokes at this question of, when is experimentation valuable? Can you even construct an experiment that you get reliable data from, just based on, your inherent biases and tendency to want to generate experiments subconsciously that will confirm what you want confirmed, right? So, curiously, when our first experiment with Instagram, was the skate audience really our best demographic, or was it the results we got the best because we wanted to be, quietly but not spoken, right? So a number of things like that. And then, in my opinion, experimentation is really effective and valuable, in which your business can be defined as a one-to-one relationship with you and your end user or customer, when there are very little other factors, such as outside players, involved in that business. So if you're building a piece of software, a website, an e-commerce site, in which it's really easy for you to control all the variables you just walk in on something that's price or color or product or a feature set. Experimentation can be really valuable. Whereas for us, we have 5 stakeholders in this business that we have to think really hard about, right? There's not only us, but there's our sales reps, right? Who we have to build a company that can work on, independent sales reps, distributors, the actual end account, the retailer that's purchasing these, and the end consumer. And curiously, as it turns out, that the end consumer and the retail, in terms of product, actually want 2 very different things. It's kind of the irony of the whole situation, right? And where this information is coming from, this opinions of mine is basically we got to a point where we didn't really know, what we needed to know in terms of experimentation. So how do you build an experiment when you don't know what you need to know? And we just continued to secure conversations with people that had a lot of relevant experience. So talking to the guy who managed all of the supply chain management stuff at Geneva Watch Group, which, if you guys are unfamiliar with them, I think something like 40% of all watches purchased in the world go through their distribution channels. They're huge conglomerate of watch brands and distribution. So the guy who managed all of their supply chain stuff, and then the guy who sales has worked there for the last 7 years. So a lot of insight into how those how you actually build a sales organization, what to expect. And we think, one of our assumptions is that's largely the luxury for us. We don't think that that's going to drastically change. So we have the luxury of this, because we're not really building anything new here, and we're not trying to disrupt the industry, that we have the luxury of being able to just copy and paste like 80% of existing information and just assume that it's an industry for us. Right? And then, you could make the argument that experimentation would be valuable for product design and stuff like that. And it's, as a company, we've just decided that we're building a brand and that we need to be a leader on that. And so that's not to mean that we're not data driven. We have 15 years of sell-through history on watch designs that we can draw on from our designers to see that, what design is tradition with some of the numbers and build off that. But we're not, in the business of building a customer loyalty. We have there is a certain art direction that we want to establish. So very little experimentation. Now, when we actually get into retail accounts, you bet we're going to be experimenting on packaging, merchandising, the pitches that our sales reps are using to sell a product. There's no other things that we can test about right now. Is that good?
That goes. So that brings us full circle to, again, the paradox, right? And that's, I want to leave and talk about that next week, and emphasizing just the 3 things to leave inside your notes or thinking about it. Right? There's experimentation is just another tool in the toolkit. It's not a panacea. And I'm going to argue, I'm making a particular case or conclusion that experimentation is not a panacea or a solution, and it's not an excuse so that you don't have to do designing. Customers don't know what they want. You have the right to build the kind of company that you want to build, experiment or otherwise. It's difficult to design experiments that work in any case because of your natural biases. And that's why my emphasis has been on using experiments as tools, the tools being results that create interesting conversations for you and your founding team and motivate action. So, like in all cases, so to end reduce all of that to a couple interesting things, right? It is a bias to action, right? You'll notice I would, if we had more time, we would disclose as a group that like the instrumentation that I used to build the coffee shop had nothing to do with ex ante experimentation to figure things out. I just started making coffee. So, and then built the experiments on the back end. And there's no right answer to that. So with that, next week there'll be very little. Be prepared next week to have a conversation in general, informally, about your venture ideas, what you've been experimenting with, how your team dynamics have gone. Right? Just be prepared for that. That's our intermediate project for next week. Be prepared to do that without any slides. Just to talk about it, be
prepared to talk about what you're learning. If you're doing work, you're learning, there'll be something to talk about. Next week will be very little prep material. I will have a couple items on Canvas by tomorrow, early tomorrow afternoon. We're going to be really light on the reading material. And next week we're also going to be really light on time. So just so you're aware, we'll have one presenter and one brief dialogue, and we'll be out relatively early, whatever that means. I just wanted to prime you, so if you wanted to set yourself up to do something, 8:30, you're able to do that. So thanks for the extra time.